During two separate events that took place during January and March of 1995, over 100 stations recorded their greatest one-day rainfalls in their respective history. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. The January storms resulted in 42 California counties being declared federal disaster areas. Then in March, the sequel resulted in all but one county in the state being declared a disaster area. We join this story already in progress on This Day in Weather History. Look, I know that this is the March 23rd edition of this podcast, but believe me, for reference and relevance, I need to start back in January. The major brunt of the January storms hit the Sacramento River Basin, and that caused several small streams to swell and flood. But it was not only the rain that caused this. It was said to have been, in large part actually, due to storm drainage system failures. So while we had flooding affecting nearly every part of the Golden State, drainage was doing nothing to help. They used to talk about the legendary 1862 flood of the Salinas River. But that legend was replaced when in this storm, the river exceeded its previous measured record crest by more than 4 feet or 1.25 meters. That was only within a foot of that 1862 mark. Also in January, the Napa River set a new peak record while the Russian and Pajaro rivers approached individual record peaks of their own. Remember that This Day in Weather History can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, and I thank you. But there is also the daily podcast video short, where they're shot right here in my recording studio so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So, after listening to the full story here, go check out the podcast video short there on television in Canada or online anytime around the world at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Okie dokie, friends, sing along if you know the words. And a 1 and a 2. What happened? A powerful Pacific jet stream was pushed well south of its normal position during much of the winter and early spring of 1995, and that's our January and March months. This caused a funnel effect where Pacific moisture and all low-pressure storm systems were driven directly, without obstruction, straight into California. And as a result, during January and March, the state was struck repeatedly, one after another, by one very strong storm system, each laden with Pacific moisture. Numerous subsequent studies have pointed out to a moderate to strong El Niño event. This would have resulted in a stronger than normal Pacific subtropical jet and a very active storm track along the path. And this is exactly what happened here. Now, although El Niño does not ever guarantee above normal precipitation for California, it has historically proven to increase the likelihood of an extended period of unusually heavy precipitation. That's a combination of rain or snow. And with that, potential flooding. Again, like what happened in this story. Oh, and these thunderstorms, they delivered. Many were severe. Some even produced a few tornadoes in California. And now back to the near-record flooding. Many of those smaller streams I mentioned earlier were overwhelmed by very heavy rain over short periods of time, and their amounts in many places exceeded 100-year, 24-hour event records. The overall impact and cost combined with the 2 months were fairly evenly distributed. The January storms more severely affected Northern California, while the March storms concentrated more of their impact on Central California. But rain was not all. I mentioned precip types. The NorCal effect included snow above the 5,000 feet mark or the 1,524 meter mark. The good news is that snow somewhat lessened the flood risk, but it created an all-new panic. Melting later that would lead to runoff. So why the panic? It snowed. A lot. During a single storm that spanned January 8th to 10th up to 12 feet, that's over 3.5 meters of snow fell on parts of the Sierra Nevada range, while elsewhere some locations reported snow depths exceeding 40 feet. That's over 12 meters by late March. Within this snow depth, there is an inherent water value, obviously, that they were concerned with. And the actual water content of the accumulated snowpack had exceeded 150% of normal in much of the Sacramento Basin and Sierra Nevada mountains at the end of March. In the end, the combined storms cost 28 people their lives and cost $4 billion in overall damages, all thanks to an event that included this day in weather history. Tomorrow is March 24th, and I'm hearkening back to International Women's Day to tribute an astronaut that broke barriers. U.S. astronaut Shannon Lucid transferred to the Russian space station Mir from the U.S. space shuttle Atlantis for a planned 5-month stay. Once she stepped over that threshold, she would go on to be the first female U.S. astronaut to live in a space station, starting this day in weather history.